Greetings people. I am currently producing a mini-series called Understanding for my channel, but the videos are going to be quite different in style compared to the norm. So normally I upload a montage with music. This time it'll be less music, more of a voiceover. So I wanted to get some practice done first, but also I didn't want the practice videos to go to waste, aka just be for the sake of practice. So what I wanted to find was an idea for a video that is less effort intensive to produce, that I could finish quite quickly within about a week, but also would serve me a good practice opportunity. And fortunately I just happened to stumble across such a thing. Over the course of January to today, basically, I've had some blessings to have sporting opportunities of controlled asymmetric 1v1 training, which I wish to name a mock DACT, and I wanted to make a video explaining my thought processes throughout some notable engagements. I wanted to showcase my wins, my losses, and explain why such results might have happened, so that you, the viewers, could take something away from the video. And despite it being an almost a certainty that this video would feel incredibly improper and informal, I still somewhat hope that it is an informative watch for anybody who bothers to. So, thanks for coming in today, and let's get started. First, the basics, the fighting conditions and the rules of engagements. The basics that applies to every single one of the matches that I'll be showcasing are as follows. First, about the team. If I'm using red wing smokes, I am flying as a red air. If I'm using blue wing smokes, I'm flying as a blue air. Also, it should be noted that in almost all of the engagements I'll be flying as a red air and the opponent will be in some other colours, usually blue. Second, no head-on shots are allowed, but because what one might consider to be a head-on situation is a bit subjective, we are in a separate VC to the engagement and we're basically calling other out, is that this is the head-on, don't shoot, I'm not going to shoot you as well. Third, pilot blackout, redout and pilot mortality are all disabled, but the visual effects might still be there, so it may look like the pilot is blacking out, but the aircraft might still retain a full maneuvering capability. So if you find that to be odd, that's the explanation for it. Fourth, in a guns-only fight, the Fox 2 is only going to be used when the enemy aircraft is just purely extending away, or he's just trying to avoid the fight for no reason, or if a previous gun damage has been done, yet the aircraft that I'm operating currently is out of ammunition, I could use the Fox 2 to finish him off because I've technically won in that situation. Fifth, the fuel consumption is off, so I'll stay with the amount of fuel that I select before the flight, or rather before the fight. Keep in mind that these are not a contest or competition, and these are basically us trying something out as a training opportunity, not to gauge who's a better pilot or what's a better aircraft. And also keep in mind that in all of the fights that I'll showcase, I'm using full rear controls, sometimes without, sometimes with damping, and the opponent will be using, mostly speaking, mouse aim and keyboard maneuver controls. Also, if there is any need to, I'll try to visualize the overall picture of the fight using what I call a hand-drawn artwork of genius, or otherwise known as Photoshop doodles, but let me feel good about myself, okay? But jokes aside and bickerings aside, with that, let's just move on to the fight number one. Fight number one, I'm in my red air F-16AJ. I'm flying against blue air Mirage 2000 CS5. General overview, the combat setups, its strengths and weaknesses, everything that you need to know are all on the screen right now. So do pause the video if you need to. One caveat here, the Mirage 2000 that my opponent is flying currently is not fully upgraded. He doesn't have engine upgrades and I think some other that I don't quite remember. So his performance here will be slightly worse than the Mirage 2000C that I flew, especially considering the limited control authority that he'll have, because it's either going to be a full maneuver or not. However, this wouldn't affect our relative performance differences. So I would fight him like I would fight any other Mirage, and I will use my superior energy retention and acceleration at high speed, low altitude, and I'm going to force him into a sustained rate fight. Meanwhile, I have to avoid being dragged into low speed, mid to high altitude vertical fight, especially considering the fact that he would have much easier time aiming his cannons at me than I would using full rear control and cockpit view. So let's play the clip then. Alright, we've merged, and I want to point out two things here. Notice how I came from underneath him, and that's for two primary reasons. First, I want to partially negate his initial turn advantage, and I want to give myself a slight turning room before we merge. And second, I will have much easier time reading his trajectory starting from this position, because I should be able to keep visual on his plane whilst I'm looking up. Is much better than looking down. And also, if you can note, after the merge I kept my turn mostly horizontal, and after climbing just a little bit, I rolled the aircraft to put my nose down again. And this is because I want to keep my airspeed very high and altitude very low. The trouble here, and as you'll see in the next portion of the video, is that I will be in a constant quote-unquote blackout situation, meaning within this scenario, I won't have control issues, but I will have very hard time maintaining tally on him. But as long as I keep my airspeed high, he won't have an easy time gaining angles on me either. So a bit of a trade-off, but soon enough, you'll see how that decision has turned out for me in the end. Okay, you can see how after the initial turn, despite him constantly having a position advantage over me, I'm now able to out-energy his aircraft, but not by much. And notice how every time I saw him trying to create an offset, I kept changing my turn directions primarily to deny him the opportunity to create the offset, right? And the moment I saw him climbing on my 6, but was slower than I was, I immediately capitalized on the opportunity and pulled much harder into him. That has two effects. So first, now the positional advantage that he had has been negated. And second, for him to create a suitable offset even in that scenario, he has to dump away even more speed, which will be tricky considering his control authority. And now, I can not only see him much better, I am also in a position to force him to be defensive against me. And the Mirage here has to do two things. First, turn very hard for once, or rather for a short moment, to create a head-on pass, and then gain some time to unload the aircraft and re-accelerate. And second, use that opportunity to climb over me, so despite having energy disadvantage, he should be able to have higher altitude and therefore positional advantage using his instantaneous turn rate. That forces me either to be defensive against his snapshots or cut off my wide and mostly horizontal circle to create or rather reduce the gap between us two. And if he manages to do both with success, then I'll have to be defensive against him once again. But could he? Well, let's see.
Over G. Over G. Over G. Over G. Over G.
Here, you can see why after he reversed, I changed my flight path to match his direction, aka left turn. Since I reversed, I was able to sneak underneath him, giving him a much more difficult of a shot. Moreover, he is now being forced to create even more offset whilst turning in the same direction as I am currently. So you can see that his nose is pitching downwards by quite a bit, and he's following my direction of turn. If he reverses his turn there, I can turn my nose around before he can, therefore getting an easy shot. If he continues onto the turn without accelerating, I can keep this up all day long, whereas he cannot. So in this situation, it might look like I'm at a disadvantage, but I'm not.
Over G. Over G. Over G. Over G. Over G.
Great. Now I've forced the Mirage to be slow and vulnerable. And despite him being inside my turn circle, he is now being forced onto a situation where he couldn't utilize that advantage properly. Notice how, after I saw him climbing over my nose, I leveled my plane to go straight or relatively little turn for a little. If I kept turning, or if I reversed my turn direction there, I'm giving him two possible options. First, a somewhat predictable high aspect shot opportunity. Second, a room, time, and position advantage to comfortably reaccelerate while staying behind me. And I want to deny that, yet I don't want to end up in his gun sight. Luckily, since he is slow, the only thing that I had to do there is to pull off a classic energy trap maneuver, and he shall receive these 20mm rounds anytime soon.
Over G. Over G. Over G.
Precisely what I want to say. A slow Mirage, still slightly climbing, right on my gun sight. But one thing to keep in mind here though, notice how I'm not maneuvering to his plane, but rather somewhere that I think he will fall down onto. And that's because of two things. First, I know he won't be able to drastically change his flight path. And second, I want to capitalize on this shot opportunity as much as possible. Hence, you can actually see me cutting him off slightly, but for now, with all this energy advantage, I can afford to do so.
Over G.
And that's the game. This fight was really about fighting someone in a tighter turning plane with better low speed acceleration, using a plate with great high speed access power and energy retention. I was able to keep my plane really fast, yet low-ish in terms of altitude using those strengths. The Mirage, though he had a potential advantage from very early on, was not able to capitalize on the advantage, hence he ended up being in a fireball. Alright then, let's move on. Fight 2. I'm in my Red Air Tornado F3, flying against the Blue Air F4J Phantom II. And like before, aircraft overview, combo setup, ups and downs, etc. are all on the screen right now, so do pause the video if you need to. The Tornado here would be expected to be a slight underperformer. The nature of the airframe can be summed up in one word: going low and fast, turning slow and wide. The F4 can gain an advantage, especially if the pilot knows how to aim the guns. So we would probably have to be defensive for most part of the fight. One thing to note prior to merging, however, he's coming in at probably about Mach 0.95, and I'm coming in at about Mach 0.8, so I'm slightly slower than he is. Reason being, or two reasons. First, I will pull a lot less than him at equal speeds above roughly 580–570 miles an hour indicated. And second, I want to put my wings, flaps and sluts into within visual range combat maneuver settings. And you can see me doing that in the bottom left corner there. However, the energy disadvantage doesn't really worry me, because I know that my plane isn't likely to fall much below 400 or 350 miles an hour indicated. So let's play the clip. Look at that Phantom's nose, man. After the first turn, notice how my Tornado, despite my efforts to absolutely pull as hard as I possibly can, it simply refuses to bleed any kind of airspeed, and this is allowing him to gain an early angle on me. However, notice two things. First, he is behind me for sure, but he cannot climb onto me and take lead for a valid shot. And second, after him beating me in that initial turn, he's now reversed his turn to match my turn, creating a flight path overlap once again. So both of the observations indicate that actually I am going to have an upper hand quite soon, because so long as I do not make any mistakes, my energy retention could be used to my fullest potential to turn around a position, the overall fight, around for my favor. Now we see two things: a slow Phantom and a fast Tornado that's probably a bit too fast. And if I keep letting it sit inside my circle, he can have a very easy snapshot opportunity. So you saw me roll the aircraft to change up the turn geometry, and that's because I want to force an overlapping two-circle against his inferior sustained turn rate. And notice how it looks like he's following me now. And that is because, well, he is. However, the Phantom cannot keep up that much rate of turn. In fact, he is barely even flying right now. Meanwhile, I have all the speed in the world, maybe arguably a bit too much, however, all the speed to break off into a two-circle anytime I want to. So I'm going to use the speed to outrate him, using the altitude advantage I have at the same time. Perfect. I'm moving on to his 6. Phantom is forced to be defensive here. I let go of the turn and bank a little here as well. The reasons being, I don't want to end up overshooting his aircraft whilst denying the possible offset. I still am not fully offensive, but in this position, whatever he does, I have a pretty decent counter against him, mostly from my energy. And the least I can say is that it's going pretty okay for me from this point on. Righty, same thing again here. Phantom reversing the turn, me giving away the position, denying the offset, making him follow me, creating an overlapping 2-circle. However, this time, it's almost a guarantee that he's going to be much slower than before. So I'll be much more aggressive this time, as you'll see from now. Great. There are two things I want to point out here. So first, when he reversed his turn this time, I simply allowed myself to get slower behind him following his turn. I could afford to do so, as he was so slow that no matter what I do, as long as I do not fly in front of him, I had an option to select my fights. Second, I leveled my plane when I was still slow, primarily to stay above the Phantom, as especially I was seeing him climbing over me, or at least trying to. If I haven't seen his climb, I would have tried to point my nose down, move away from him, and force him to turn a lot more angles to get to me. But now that he has tried to reverse so many times, he's significantly slower, and he's basically trying to stand on his engines. And now, if he wants to regain the energy, he has to stay in front of me. If he wants to force the slow speed fight, I could simply go over him. And if he wants to reverse, he would find it incredibly difficult to not fly across my cannon. And you should be able to see that yourself, and I move onto to get a valid shot on him. So let's continue. Now we're talking. The Phantom slow, climbing in front of me, basically forced without an option here. If he runs away, I could chase him down no problem. If he decides to reverse, well, he can't. Moreover, he has already sustained some damage, so he won't be flying too well at this point. And like the first fight, it's only a matter of time I get a clean gunshot on him. Voila! 2 lessons from this fight. Lesson number 1. Trust your airframe. If you know there is an advantage you can absolutely make use of, stick to that plan and be careful not to be dragged into the fight the enemy wants you to. Lesson number 2. Capitalize on all opportunities. Take risks whenever you can, and the outcome for doing so can be reliable and predictable. The Phantom had a lot of valid shot opportunities, yet he failed to capitalize on the opportunity, eventually giving in to my game plan. I, meanwhile, was in a disadvantageous position to begin with, yet, since I remained calm and wasn't bothered by his tactics, I was able to fully utilize my strengths against the opponent. So keep calm and always assess your situation. And if there is no need to, do not change up your game plan. or take otherwise unwanted risks, if you understand that there are no immediate losing cues. Also, study the airframe that you're fighting. It's helpful to know what the opponent is capable of and what they are not capable of. And this helps you especially in that it prevents you from getting into a panic mode that isn't necessary. Keeping calm and steady in a tense situation could bring about the life or death difference. Alright, enough rambling, so let's move on. Last debrief of today. I'm in Sr.A Mirage 4000, flying against Blue Air JS-39A Gripen. As per usual, overview setup planes, pluses, minuses, blah blah, are all on the screen right now. The fight is actually pretty even, and one might even say that Gripen is at a slight disadvantage. The reason being, he would prefer a very specific kind of fight in this scenario, having a less than ideal fuel load. He would still win a high-speed raid fight against me, yet I have a lot more of a combat choice than he does. Having the thrust-to-weight advantage, I can accelerate better below certain speed than him. I could also climb higher than him, store at lower indicated airspeeds than he would, and pull a lot more AOA than he can. So in terms of diversity of strategy, I have an upper hand here. However, this doesn't mean I get to choose what fight I play with him, which we'll see now. The first match shows two things. I was being aggressive, the Gripen was being conservative. He probably wants to use my inferior maneuvering energy retention against me, which is a valid strategy, so in this case I have to think very hard. I am now sitting inside his turning circle, yet I would remain slower than him throughout this vertical climb. So my plan here would be to try to stay inside his turn circle, whilst minimizing the maneuvers required. That means maintaining visuals on target could be pretty hard as well. But at least now I have an early position against him, so that's a positive. And let's see how this scenario develops. The situation's going pretty well for me. Notice how different to two previous fights, I'm always in an offset of his flight path. I know that I cannot win the fight of drawing the similar circle quicker. So instead, I am doing the fight of pointing my aircraft to and reaching a certain location in the map, a three-dimensional location, faster than he could. If I time this wrong, or if I misinterpret his status, he can use my excessive lead pursuit to turn inside me. So I have to be aware of at all times not to give him an easy opportunity to do so. This, in turn, means that being always ready to aggressively turn into him, denying his turning route. So for now, we are playing a literal cat and mouse game, won by quicker reaction and better judgment. Now we have something. And notice how I'm much closer to the Gripen than before. And this means that I could try to have a valid gunshot opportunity against him. This also means that I'm successfully creating an offset and he is unable to push into me. However, not everything is as rosy as it seems. We are in a descending spiral, and ground would be a real problem quite soon. Also, I am finding myself having to use a diving turn to cut his circle off. This means he's technically at an energy advantage over me. So, the plan now is to read the altitude, stay in position, deny his turning room, and get ready for a deck transition. And God only knows if it'll actually work out at all. Alright, expected, the Gripen has now turned offensive on me. And this is due to his superior turn rate at this altitude and speed, and me being able to offset using altitude. But I'm not without any plans either. I am slower than him, yet I have better instantaneous turn at almost all speeds with tighter circle. So I will use that to tighten my turn down, deny him a firing solution, go over him and reverse into one circle. Let's play the game then. Alright, we see an interesting development. Remember how I said ice had lower stall speed and better thrust weight ratio? Well, thanks to that, despite my energy retention disadvantage, I was able to do a couple things. First, hold my position, using my thrust and low stall speed to remain slow inside and therefore behind his turning room. Second, be faster than him for a moment when I want to. Third, use the momentum to outrate him, bleeding some speed doing so. And this has resulted in the exact situation where I want the Gripen to be in. Slow, in front of my nose, unable to easily escape from me. Mission successful, I guess. And that's the game. So having a lot of options to play in a dogfight matters as much as having one very definitive advantage. Not only can you avoid being forced into the fight that you know that you are going to lose, but you are also able to counter the opposing strategy by employment of tactics the opponent is unable to follow. So to sum it up, it's always a good thing to have in your position something other than superiority, which is asymmetry. Right, and that's it for the video. So pretty low effort, and I'm not the best in Debrief to begin with, so do please let me know where I can improve or if there are anything that I should correct myself upon. And if you're still here, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all later with another one of these videos, probably. Peace out. Cheers.
Then we hauled to the Bull and the Bell. Goodbye, fare thee well, goodbye, fare thee well. Where good liquor they do sell. Hurrah, me boys, we're home.